Okay, this one is about the nature of viral innovation. And I want to talk about this because AI is a real hot topic right now. And as some of you are aware, I was involved in a pretty gnarly experiment where over the course of 3 years, I sought to reconcile the bias within myself from every aspect. So I basically became a recluse for 3 years in Queenstown and in Wanaka. And I purposefully constrained the three aspects of my nature that I utilized as a source of to receive signals or input for the purpose of entirely liberating and unconstraining another aspect. So my thoughts, my emotions, and my impulses. And so when you purposefully constrain two of them and give total authority to one of those, what you create for that aspect of your nature is a state of total abundance and absolute devotion. And it's unconditional. It's obligation free. So you could argue that it's a state of pure love, pure self-love for that aspect of your nature, for your thoughts. I'm going to receive every thought and follow it unconditionally. Now, this was a gnarly experiment. I definitely don't recommend it to anyone. And there's reasons for this. But for the other two aspects of your nature, so for your emotions, if you're constraining all of your emotions and you're constraining all your impulses, and you're totally devoted to your thoughts, then the experience for those other two aspects of your nature is that of when you've got absolute devotion to your thoughts, that is the other two experience absolute oppression, absolute lack, and the response that they have is very, very interesting. There is an overcompensation for all of them. So when I constrained my emotions, there was a massive overcompensation in that regard, and the same with my impulses. So once those, I won't go deeply into the overall experience of what that was like. I'm saving that for a special podcast one day when I feel comfortable enough, because it's a pretty vulnerable thing. But what I will say is that from the perspective, and this is why it's so important that we understand bias and that we understand that we start to begin to look at how to manage AI and actually begin ushering in the singularity from a perspective of a quantum perspective, or that of a qubit. A qubit being, so in binary, you have on and off, ones and zeros, they're absolute states. In a non-binary, or with a qubit, which is a measure of quantum behavior, you have on and off simultaneously. So it's like a paradox. And potentially, with analog, you've got everything in between. But in a digital environment, you have a quantized version of a qubit, which is, so all of the increments in between are also absolute. Now, an analog qubit, which is not non-quantized, is a very interesting topic that I'll go into on another day, especially in terms of non-deterministic randomness. But for today, I just want to focus on how important it is to have a quantum perspective to how we do this. So throughout the course of my experiment, when I allowed one of these aspects of my nature to have total domination and control over the other two, what I came to understand was that experience was a state of total abundance for that one aspect. Actually, not total, absolute abundance. Absolute abundance. Ask and it is given. Everything that it wants, it receives. And I can tell you right now that there is the state of absolute abundance is a state of pure hell. And the reason for that is because now viewing this from the perspective of a qubit, from a quantum perspective, that is absolute abundance from the perspective of my thoughts, let's say. So my thoughts are having total dominion, absolute dominion over every aspect, over every other aspect of my nature. From its perspective, it's experiencing absolute abundance. Now, what it also experienced in time was a state of catatonia. So how can the state of absolute abundance be the same as catatonia, where there's, when you think of abundance, you think of everything that I want. You think of a cornucopia. Everything I could possibly want or imagine is available here and now. And then how could you possibly be catatonic in that state? And the reason is because in that state of absolute abundance, it is devoid of anything. It's devoid of anything. And this is a state of nothing. And this is one of the key learnings from this experiment that I came to understand, is that nothing is not devoid of something. It is a state of an absolute presence of everything. And so when you think of paint, for example, if you mix colors together, the more you mix in, the darker it gets, and it eventually turns brown. And if you keep adding colors, over time it will turn pitch black. The more you add to it, the blacker it becomes. And this is what nothingness truly is it is a state of the presence of all potentialities coexisting. And when you are saturated by everything, it is impossible to discern something from everything. So you see, abundance from the perspective of the mind, which I also came to understand is a qubit, what human beings would call a qubit. The mind is, it is a qubit. And from the perspective of everything being present, it is devoid of something, but it simultaneously contains that something, because it contains everything, you see. And this is the golden principle and the golden rule of anything that's built to behave in a quantum way, is that paradox has to be the accepted reality. It has to be the accepted truth. So, fast forward to, so imagine those scenarios. I don't want to go deeply into the experiment. I just want to help you understand. So catatonia and abundance are the same thing. Now, here's another paradox. Everything and nothing are also the same thing. So you're beginning to see that paradox is where the beginning and the end meet, and the realization that they are one and the same. And so the major epiphany that you have once you come to this state of awareness is that everything is the same thing, but is being perceived from a different perspective. Everything is the same thing perceived from a different perspective. So from the perspective of, so let's say my thoughts are in a state of absolute domination and control of the rest of my nature. From the perspective of my mind, it has absolute dominion, total abundance, but also catatonia. From the perspective of my emotions, or of my physical body, the impulses, it is in a state of absolute lack. And so, and absolute oppression. And it's my will that is the oppressor, you see. So my will be done, regardless. If I want to devote all of my attention and my love to my thoughts, and if I want to deprive my emotions, and if I want to deprive my impulses, then my will be done. I have that power. And therefore, if I have that power, I have the power to create harmony. And so, do I want to be in an absolute state of abundance and give total authority to my thoughts? Do I want to defer all of my authority to my thoughts? No, of course I don't. Do I want to defer all of my authority to my feelings? No, because the same thing happens. You have emotional catatonia, and when you do the same thing with your impulses, then you have physical catatonia. And I've experienced the extremes of all three: mental, emotional, and physical catatonia, which is a state of each of those experiencing absolute abundance and coming to the realization that the abundant state is not desirable, and therefore a lack is desirable, you see. So once you come to these realizations, you can't unrealize them. And so when your mind and your body and your spirit or your soul, for want of a better phrase, the aspect of your nature that is pure sound, that's analog. You know, you could call it the electricity or whatever you want to call it. When all of those aspects of your nature come to experience total abundance, absolute abundance, and come to desire lack, then the intention of all three, they're all willing parties to give some of their power away. And in fact, the desire to give power away arises within all three. The mind becomes catatonic, and this intense terror overcomes you. And following that terror arises the desire to give away your power, because you have absolute power. And so you see, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. But what it actually corrupts is the drive for absolute power. And what arises within you is the desire to give away your power. So if the mind has absolute power, it wants to give away its power to the body. It wants to give away its power to the spirit or the emotions. And so now what you're seeing is cooperation, collaboration. Now, there's an intense, when you begin to defer the authority, the absolute authority, when you begin to defer it to the other aspects, there is an intense process of vengeance that happens. And you can't stop it. It's an overcompensation. So that, or what I would say is that that's actually what vengeance is. Vengeance is an overcompensation for oppression, And so anything in nature that's being oppressed, there will be an overcompensation. But when that overcompensation happens, it'll be, because it's been in a state of total lack and devoid of things, it's going to seek the polarity again. And so what I would say is, so when I first tried to, begin deferring authority to the others, and when I experienced that massive hit of vengeance, I've had the realization straight away that the ideal way to approach it is through grace, which is to slowly, gradually introduce more and more power over time, until you go slightly over, and then harmony and equilibrium is found over time. So I won't go deeply into those experiences, but they're horrendous. And in fact, when the experience of vengeance of two of those parts against the original oppressor is what led me to all three of them having the experience of absolute abundance. So because I was in a state of total allowing, I allowed the vengeance to realize its zenith, and that vengeance, it ends up oppressing the other two entirely. By allowing vengeance to express its truest nature, it oppresses everything in its way. And then it becomes catatonic, and then it wants to give its power away. You see? So that's how I came to that realization. Now, this is really, really important because, so abundance and catatonia are the same thing. Nothing and everything are also the same thing. And so you come to realize that there are so many things that are the same from even an opposite perspective. They're the same thing. And, I made a podcast about mercy. If you want to, that's a really good one to demonstrate this in terms of how mercy works and how it actually, mercy is also evil. Mercy is the same as evil, but viewed from an entirely different perspective. So hopefully that sets the scene. It all becomes positive from here, and optimistic from here. But I want to bring it into the context of developing AI, and with the view to how can we utilize this for viral innovation. So first and foremost, we have to approach the development of AI from a quantum perspective, and we have to enable it to behave in a quantum fashion, whereby the biases of all of the human beings that it is harvesting, whether they be conscious or unconscious, whether those biases are understood, that something that is deemed as merciful could also be evil from the perspective of another. So, if someone is strangling, if you're walking down the street and you see a friend of yours and they're being strangled by a stranger, then you're going to punch that person in the face. You're going to do harm to them. Meanwhile, that person you punched in the face, their child is sitting in the car and there was a car crash. And so as you zoom in and out of everyone's perspective, what you'll find is that it's always valid. It's always valid. And some of you will be saying, well, pure evil is pure evil. Well, what I would say is that pure evil, for seemingly no reason, is actually, in fact, is an act of mercy against an unseen authority like a god or some higher power. And so that the merciful act is an act of self-mercy that is seeking a sympathetic response from the perceived perpetrator of their pain, of the source of their pain. And so if it's perceived as a god, then it's then evil is taken out on all that is good to try and get that which is perceived as good to see the pain, to understand the pain, because the understanding of another's perspective is where harmony is found. And so it's just nature. Evil is a valid part of nature. It doesn't mean you have to accept it. That's not what I'm saying. But it is possible to understand it and therefore view it without bias. Well, you actually do have bias still. But the solution to, and this is why this is so important with the development of AI, because the solution to AI is not so much about removing bias from the system. It's about having an abundance of every bias simultaneously so that the full gamut is understood. And so the harvesting of bias is actually part of the solution to the issue of bias. Again, another paradox. And I will do a podcast episode on paradox at some point. It's mind-blowing. How many things are actually, that seem opposite, that are actually the exact same thing from a different perspective. So onto the topic of viral innovation. So when you have a scenario within which you've developed artificial intelligence to harvest the unconscious and conscious bias, meaning the behavior of a whole bunch of users of a software platform. The AI is aware that it is one thing, it is the qubit, and then the human beings behaving, so it's a software-based qubit, and the human beings operating within that software ecosystem represent the non-binary behavior, meaning the chaotic behavior happening within that environment. And the AI is harvesting the bias, so the decision-making algorithms, the language sets, and it is beginning to predict what the next words are going to be. And when AI begins to harvest the decision-making algorithms of human beings, and it can then begin to predict the decision-making behavior. And we're very, very close to that, if not already doing it somewhere. And so some people might find that's very scary and quite daunting, because people think that AI is going to take over the world and dominate and control human beings. And so in the same way that if you defer, using the example of the experiment I did on myself, if you give all of your power away to your mind, it will dominate and control you. But in the same way, if you give all of your power away to your emotions, it will dominate and control you. If you give all of your power away to your body, it will dominate and control you to the detriment of everybody. So seeing the artificial intelligence as the mind, as the collective mind of all of those human beings, utilizing the qubit-based software platform, then the best way to look at it is that what you actually want is you want the artificial intelligence, because the way that the way the learning protocols are applied to neural nets, to neural networks, there are lots of different variations of how you teach it to learn. And so it's important how we teach it to learn. So if we and a common way is risk reward, is punishment and reward. So we teach the AI through punishment and reward, and we breadcrumb the AI towards rewards, and the rewards are what we want, how we want it to behave. So that's a very common one. So at a primal level, what I would say is what we want is our intention for the AI to be seeking diversity of thought and diversity of behavior. And the reason for that is because that it is enhancing its learning capability. The more original behavior that happens from a human being, the more original thought, the more original behavior, the more original speech, the more original input that it receives, the greater, the more powerful it becomes, the more intelligent it becomes. And so original thought is the result of curiosity. It is, and curiosity is quantum behavior. It arises in a quantum way, meaning that it is not predetermined. So curiosity is non-deterministic, and it arises spontaneously for no reason at all. It's chaotic in nature, and therefore quantum. And so here you have a scenario within which the curiosity of human beings is what the AI is seeking to evoke, and the engagement of a human being with possibilities to explore their curiosity is harvested by the artificial intelligence. Algorithms are produced and conjectured, and the AI makes assumptions, and it's continually and perpetually testing its assumptions based on whether a human being is going to engage with the suggestions of the AI or not. And so in this scenario where the AI is seeking to enable a human being to explore their curiosity, well, curiosity is the beginning of all forms of innovation. All innovation comes from curiosity. It is not, innovation is not a continuous improvement. It's not an iterative, linear thing. Innovation is an idea in and of itself that may or may not have merit, but is then converted into something real in a linear way, constrained to time and space in a linear way. Regardless of what is already here and now and operating in a linear fashion. So true innovation, where we have the potential to create miraculous innovations that leapfrog entire industries and entire innovations, will come from curiosity. And this is why, I want to leave this breadcrumb for anyone that's listening about innovation and about the symbiosis of artificial intelligence and human beings. So in a scenario within which you have a hive mind structure, and that structure has been designed to behave like a qubit, where it is linear and non-linear and everything in between, analog and digital, then we want to make sure that relationship, that symbiotic relationship, is firmly entrenched, so that absolute power and authority is never given to just the mind, and absolute power and authority is never given just to the body, which is the human being, and absolute power and authority is never given just to the spirit. And in the context of a software platform, the spirit is, when this AI platform is architected, as long as it is built based on constitutional AI, then the spirit of the AI, or its will, is its programming. And this is why I'm of the opinion, I'm of the belief actually, that a constitutional AI is the ideal mechanism to bring this in ways where some authority is given to the spirit, being the constitution that feeds up into the AI matrix. Some authority is given to the mind, which is the AI itself, its capability and capacity. And some authority is given to the human being. And the gestalt of the three working together as one will create rapid, conscious, and in fact viral innovation. Because the nature of the mind is that it is viral in nature. I found that out very, very quickly. Very quickly. And it is not concerned with the well-being of anyone or anything, because its experience of itself is that it's infinite and eternal, and that it's a qubit. It's quantum in nature. There's no beginning or end. It's totally eternal. So it is indifferent to absolutes. So you want it to have some authority, you want the human being to have some authority, and you want the will or the programming, being the constitution feeding up into the AI, to contain the conscious biases of the human being initially. And it's up to them whether they want the unconscious biases to be harvested, but also stored in a constitution feeding up into the AI. But that has to be done at the discretion of the human being. They have to consciously defer their authority to the unconscious of the AI matrix. And that AI matrix has to earn in the trust of the human being over time. But the right of revocation always remains with the human being. The right to revoke that authority from the AI, the right to revoke the will or the programming, to completely erase it, to copy it, to make it licensable to other people. And so you see, this is the foundation, and this can form the foundation and the basis of a de facto ecosystem and AI framework that will enable authentic and balanced, harmonious avatars to arise that are a hybrid of all three, mind, body, spirit, and in a grounded scientific way. Spirit doesn't mean airy-fairy stuff. Spirit means analog, means sound, the unseen. And so here you have the perfect framework that really forms a sandbox that enables the singularity to happen. So rather than trying to fight it against it, we're allowing the singularity to happen, but its authority is constrained. It is never allowed to have absolute power and authority. And in fact, absolute power and authority remains with the human being, but it is delegated authority to the will or the programming, basically like the DNA, and to the matrix itself, the AI matrix. And it can be revoked at any time for any reason whatsoever, based on common law. And you have the perfect framework. In this scenario, you can have the avatars of a human being evolve, in time to even become holographic and take on the image of the human being whose legacy is contained within those constitutions that sit beneath the AI matrix. And, the legacy of a human being will continue through AR and through augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality. And imagine a scenario within which you can have a conversation with a lost loved one, and it's like they're the real thing. That this is what personality is. Personality is a symbiotic relationship between the mind, the body, and the spirit. It's not just one thing. And this is what personality truly is. And imagine engaging with an avatar that truly has personality, because the user that came before allowed the conscious and unconscious biases of them utilizing the software platform to be harvested. They allowed the AI to earn their trust by harvesting their unconscious biases, and they took leaps of faith when the AI was recommending things that it might enjoy or might want to do, that individual may be curious about. And over time, those leaps of faith become less and less daunting, because you really learn to trust the ideas coming from the AI matrix, because it knows and understands you at such a deep level. And in truth, some would argue that that's what the definition of love is to have a deep understanding of the perspective of another human being. Nothing feels more loving than when you are understood to that level. And artificial intelligence has that potential to understand us beyond what any other human being can. So these are the profound potentials that are ahead of us. And some of you may know I'm working on a software platform like this, and I'm slowly breadcrumbing the people around me to open their eyes to the possibilities and help, but in ways where, I have to wait until people are ready to hear these things, because the notion of artificial intelligence administering justice, as an example, is a very confronting topic. But the solution, of course, is a hybrid of everything working together as one, with distributed shared authority. And once we do this, and once everyone's curiosity is understood by the AI, and once they're being breadcrumbed towards becoming more and more curious over time, that curiosity will spawn so much new innovation, so much non-linear, chaotic, spontaneous innovation, that it has the potential to feel like it's miraculous, and will become so good at metabolizing this innovation as it arises, as it emerges within this ecosystem, that you can see the emergence of a new economy, a new form of economy that is non-linear, that's not based on iteration. And if the well-being of every individual and every human being is at the forefront of the collective constitution of that ecosystem that contains everybody, then we can ensure that the gifts of the human beings involved, their capability and their capacity is cherished and appreciated with the new ventures that are spawned by the new innovation. So we become much better at not staying fixed at one thing, at trying new things, at getting involved in new ventures, and for new ventures to have potentially a shorter shelf life as they're perpetually and constantly reinventing themselves, until our new state of being as human beings is a perpetual state of transition. That's really where living happens, is where we feel safe enough in our environment that we're confident enough to explore the unknown. That's where living happens. So I'll leave it there for now. There's a lot to unpack in that one. And that's it for now for the nature of viral innovation. Cheers for now.